I'm a lawyer, so does my husband. Maybe you don't like lawyers. Honestly, I can understand why. But I still hope that you are ready to hear both sides of the story. After all, that's what lawyers are for, right? Perhaps you will remain steadfast in your rightness when it comes to cheating wives. But you should at least listen to the other side of the truth, even if it comes from the mouth of a lawyer. My name is Jill Chandler. I married Jake Roberts, and now I'm tired of being his wife. I'm sick of always being the bad guy in his story of supposedly broken vows and broken hearts. Oh, I'll never deny that I acted selfishly. But I wasn't the only one who did this, you know. There is no reason why my dear husband should take the moral high ground. He has asserted his right to do so too many times. In fact, he's been doing this since I've known him. To understand what really happened at that reunion in sweet and sunny Florida, we need to go back a few years. We also need to take a more objective look at Jake Roberts, my husband. Look at him without the bias that he allowed you to see in his part of the story. You see, I love Jake. I still love him. But that doesn't mean I'm blind to the fact that he's morally colorblind. He sees only black and white. He sees the world as divided into two sides, his side and the wrong side. There is only good and bad, right and wrong. Yes, I know people admire him for that. As a public defender, he became a champion of the weak. And rightly so. He's a good person. His heart is in the right place, and it is surrounded by reinforced concrete. But away from the stage, he is also the person I live with, the one to whom I gave my heart. It belongs to him. But tell me, does this mean that only he can decide for what and how it should fight? Jake Roberts has a vision and a mission. This is his vision and his mission. He lives for them. I'm sure he would die for them if given the chance. This is his food and drink, his obsession. They guide his life, and mine too. They control us so much that it borders on autism and claustrophobia. I love Jake Roberts, but I refuse to believe that love obliges a woman to turn off her brain. If this is what people call unconditional love, then I'm not happy with it. I'm proud of my intelligence. During my years in law school, I was the smartest person in the group, and my parents always gave me good advice. Never stop using your brain. All this may sound harsh and ruthless, but that's not true. I am a caring mother. I am a loving wife and have been a faithful companion through poverty and struggle over the years. But I'm also human. I have needs and dreams. 2 days before we were supposed to go to homecoming, Jake told me he couldn't go. I wasn't surprised. I expected this. He had a court case for a petty thief. He could have assigned it to another lawyer, but that's not Jake's style. He felt obligated to this petty criminal. He said he gave him his word. In the past, I would have reminded him that he had obligations to me as well. He knew how important it was for me to go and break out of mom mode, at least for a little while, to freshen up and take a break. However, my warrior days are behind me. Too many moral defeats have cured me of this. I even suggested not to go either. It has become a polite form of communication. Yes, we have become very polite to each other. Of course, he vehemently refused. Sacrifice is his second nature. He said he would arrive the next day. Probably the next day, I thought, if he comes at all. Experience makes a person bitter. Jake knew how important this weekend was to me. Since getting pregnant and giving birth to our son, Jake Jr., 3 years ago, I have been hooked on motherhood. I saw only mothers, children, and more children. Going to the supermarket was a holiday for me, but I'm not complaining. I wanted this baby too, didn't I? I never complained. I love this boy to death. I consider his birth the most important event in my life. My love for little Jake is unconditional. But once again, this does not make me brain dead. I'm still me, Jill Chandler. I'm not asking for much, but at least sometimes I need to break away and breathe. Jake knows this. He is narrow-minded, but he is not soulless. He knew that going to my homecoming was the balm my parched soul needed. This was the perfect opportunity to refuel my worn-out engine. I've been running on an empty tank for too long. I dreamed of being back where I was free and carefree. Do not think about anything. to be among the people with whom I shared my carefree youth, to become young, beautiful, and stupid again. I knew it was just an illusion, a sweet southern mirage. All this would last only a few days, but at that moment, that was all I needed. Oh, of course, Jake would never turn me down. Go, darling. You definitely deserve it. But the petty thieves of this world come first. That evening, before I left for Miami, I made one last attempt to revive his autistic brain. There must have been some connection between his brain and his one place, I thought. Perhaps she has atrophied. Perhaps she was overwhelmed with endless court cases and laws. But I had to try. I dieted for weeks, worked out, and tanned to look my best in the beachwear I bought. And so, before packing my things, I showed him everything. A new blue bikini, sexy short tops, bright peros, and, of course, your new body. Of course, he appreciated it. So does Big Jake. We made love, and it was good. But sex was only part of what I wanted to show. I wanted to give him one last chance to change his mind and come with me. Of course, he didn't understand anything. As soon as I got off the plane, I felt it. A warm breeze greeted me with millions of gentle touches. He made my hair dance. It was the wind of freedom. It was cold and drizzling in Boston. There I wanted to shrink and preserve my inner warmth. Miami opened me up with the touch of a magic wand. From the very first second, I felt like I was back at 21. My back straightened. My muscles relaxed, and I puffed my chest out proudly in careless defiance. Thank God the airport is busy. This forced them to use the old ramps and bus to the arrivals hall. There's nothing more glamorous than walking down a ramp into the blinding sun. Little things can mean a lot to a withered heart. Sally was waiting for me at the exit. It's been almost a year since I saw her live. And yes, she has gained weight and quite a lot. I remember how we struggled with extra pounds during our student years. She did it out of necessity, and I did it out of solidarity. It looks like she has given up now. But her wonderful smile hasn't lost a watt since we were girls and best friends. Her laugh was as frankly deep as ever. We hugged. Jake doesn't like Sally. I understand why. Sally is the exact opposite of everything he despises. She lives for herself. She savors the moment and greedily sucks every last drop of joy from him. She is an irresponsible cricketer, while Jake is the hard-working ant of the fable. She takes what she needs, and it sounds selfish, but she is generous. She is generous to the extreme and shares her joy in abundance. Sally never cared about money or the future. And God, how we laughed during law school. "Where is your husband?" she asked when we pulled away. I shrugged. She understood everything. "Come on, girl," she exclaimed. First surprise. She took me outside into the hot Florida sun. There was a yellow sports convertible parked right by the side of the road. Juan Mendoza was driving. Of course, you remember the movie Back to the Future asterisk. When I saw Juan, I instantly returned to the moment when I first saw him. I was 21 and the sun was shining brighter. The air was fresher and much sweeter. My steps were light and springy. Juan smiled when he saw me, a flash of light on his handsome tan face. This smile acted like a magnet for the corners of my lips. It was easy to smile back at him. Warmth spread throughout my body. Juan jumped out of the car without opening the door. He ran around, and we were hugging before I knew what was happening. His chest was hard under his silk shirt. My soft breasts pressed against him. His hands were everywhere. Have I compared? His toned muscles and Jake's love handles starting to appear. His golden tan and the sickly white skin of a Boston winter. I don't remember. I really don't remember. But I liked it. "Jill," Juan exclaimed. His big warm hands held my face. He caught my eye. God, how nice it was to feel so desired. We kissed. Sally whistled. Juan took my suitcase and put it in the trunk. He then opened the passenger door. Sally climbed into the back seat. I slid to the front. We roared off to the resort. I was 21 again. The wind whipped through my flowing hair. Boston? Where is Boston anyway? The resort was exactly how I imagined it. Palm trees, white sandy beaches, and sparkling ocean. The room was more like a small apartment, my own little cabin in the tropics. Wooden shutters, rustic tiles, and whitewashed walls. A luxurious bouquet of bougainvillea draped over the tiny terrace. I fell on the bed. She closed her eyes and listened to her racing heartbeat. The trip was exciting. Juan steered his small sports car like a slithering snake through evening traffic. We shouted over the noise of the engine, laughed, and even sang. We flew like irresponsible teenagers under the deep blue dome of the Florida spring sky. Juan's hand was on my thigh. I removed it, soft, and not right away. Our eyes met. I smiled. After taking a shower, I put on a short summer dress that I bought in rainy Boston. It was a warm yellow color. It glowed on the tan skin of her chest and legs. I stood in front of a tall mirror and decided how many buttons to unbutton. Then she changed her mind and unfastened another one. I grabbed my purse and went outside. Was going to meet others for drinks and a lovely dinner. It was only when I started to close the door that I remembered. My face flushed with embarrassment. I sat down on the terrace and took my phone out of my purse. My mother's voice seemed like a voice from another planet. Little Jake's excitement sent a warm wave through my body. It was a feeling of shame. Shame that I hadn't thought of him since I landed in Miami. The cocktails were exotic. They had all the right colors and small umbrellas, just like they should. They also had the ability to make one's head spin pleasantly. All the old friends were there. I saw Bill and George with their spouses. Both were close friends of Jake, and of course I met Steve and Meredith. Steve was the best man at our wedding. Now they have become a strong couple. His hair thinned and her waist, on the contrary, widened. But the same energy of our common past still sparkled in their eyes. Meredith pulled me aside to tell me about how she and Steve were planning to have a baby. She asked me about the two Jakes, and I realized that this was not at all the topic that I really wanted to talk about. Alcohol helped erase the years. Soon we were back to where we were 10 years ago, loud, free, and slightly tipsy. As we lined up at the magnificent buffet for dinner, Juan Mendoza somehow ended up next to me. His twin brother Hector stood slightly behind. He introduced me to his incredibly sexy blonde trophy wife. Her name was Maria, although, to be honest, the name Barbie would suit her better. They got married last year. As I learned from mutual friends, Maria was a former Playboy model. She loved to show why. Her long, tanned legs seemed endless. I didn't think her breasts were real, but they looked amazing. They almost fell out of her sparkly top. Was I jealous? I think not. During cocktail hour, I enjoyed the influx of attention and compliments. And God, how it caressed my mother's tormented ego. Of course, Juan hasn't left my side since the moment he and his brother showed up. They were staying on their yacht at the marina, he said, and I simply had to come and see it. As we sat down with our plates, he and Sally joined me. Hector and Maria did the same. The Mendoza brothers have always been mirror images of each other. The years haven't changed them at all. Watching Hector made me smile. His boyish pride in his new toy almost burst through him, and Maria loved to play it. She did not hide her charms at all from enthusiastic men and envious women. God, is this high school again? We ate and talked. There was even more chilled white wine, and of course, Juan's hand. I stopped pushing her away after the fourth attempt. We had a great time reminiscing about the good old days. Sally's laughter sounded like the sun across our table. The food was amazing, and the wine lubricated all the rusty gears of our aging brains. The fingers sliding down my legs could not anatomically belong to Juan, especially considering that his hand was now touching my other thigh, right where my new sexy thong began. But by that point, I didn't care. Steve stood up and made a speech. I'm sure he didn't say even half of what he prepared at home, but his speech was probably twice as funny because of it. We supported and applauded him. This gave me the opportunity to stand up and shake off the Cuban attention. Then coffee was served. I took the opportunity to move to another table. I talked to old friends and those who were once enemies. New drinks and music have appeared. a little dancing with Steve and Bill. Then 11 o'clock struck, and it was time to find my bed. I thought it would be wise to refuse Juan's invitation to see his yacht. I felt like I was 21 again. Perhaps I was even excited, but my inner mother still believed that she should be my mentor. That night, I satisfied myself twice. Once on the bed, as soon as I returned to my cabin, and one time in the shower that was meant to calm me down. My fantasies were wild and satisfying. Jake wasn't in them. I felt embarrassed about this and tried to call him. I'm not sure if I was disappointed that I couldn't get it. He didn't call me. Was I upset about this? I was still thinking when I fell asleep. Breakfast was late and delicious. There was plenty of fresh fruit, yogurt, and cereal. Once again, I was surrounded by the company of memories of my youth. I did 20 laps in the pool. I also ran several miles along the ocean. I felt on top of the world when Juan Mendoza and Sally joined us. Sally was literally beaming. She seemed to be completely delighted. The highlight of the day was going to be a luau on the beach at sunset. But before that, we all had a sea cruise with the opportunity to dive with masks and snorkels. This idea delighted me. I love snorkeling. But Sally shrugged. She said she wouldn't go on a boat with pale, boring tourists. We had to share it with a group of teachers from the north. Nothing cool, Jill, she said. Let's go with Juan and Hector. They invited me on their luxury yacht. Come with us, Jill. It will be a lot more fun. I looked at Juan. He nodded and smiled encouragingly. Then Sally started trying to persuade me to join. She also invited Steve and Meredith. They hesitantly agreed. I looked at the group of teachers. They gathered on the patio adjacent to the breakfast area. It really was a pretty sad bunch. I grinned. Damn it, I said. Why take a school bus if there's a Ferrari waiting nearby? Well, you know what happened next. You read what Jake saw. But did he see what he thought he saw? Yes, we had fun. And that was just the fun. We drank and smoked. Sally took off her swimsuit top. She said she always sunbathes topless. And we weren't on a public beach, were we? Besides, we were 21 again, remember? We were drunk and high. Even the steadfast Meredith took off the top of her swimsuit and threw it on the table. Hector's wife, the doll Maria, did not wear a swimsuit top from the very beginning. I can understand why Jake took it the way he did. He was tired and sweaty when he arrived. He was annoyed that he was denied a room. He was disappointed that his surprise plans didn't work out. He always gets a little crazy when he has to improvise. And of course, the Mendoza brothers. During my first year of law school, I dated Juan. He was funny, charming, and the most handsome guy in the area. Moreover, he was rich and generous. His parties were famous. I liked Jake from the very beginning, but he was shy and very, very serious. He studied harder than anyone. Jake was from a poor family and studied on a scholarship. He never had a lot of money, but I doubt he would spend more even if he were richer. He spent most of his time studying and doing odd jobs to earn pocket money. I never saw him at parties. Even at football or basketball games, he remained on the sidelines. He almost never stayed for beer or barbecue after games. But towards the end of the last semester of the first year, Juan and Hector stole my law review topic. It wasn't that important. I could come up with something else. But the way Juan reacted to my protests completely turned me off. He didn't apologize. He just laughed. In the following days, he paid almost no attention to me. Maybe I thought then that he only dated me because of this. We worked in small groups on projects. I was on the same team as Jake and told him about the theme theft. God, I shouldn't have done that. The next day, I found out that Jake had been beaten by Juan and his brother. He confronted them and said they stole my law review topic. Hector had a black eye, but of course Jake had no chance against the two Cubans. Classmates stopped the fight. Jake was left with bruises and a dislocated jaw. That's when I fell in love with him. After the fight, Jake always avoided his brothers. Out of loyalty, I also stayed away from them. Not because I harbored a grudge for the theft. The whole incident was soon almost forgotten. Juan remained Juan, a cheerful but spoiled boy, not someone worth wasting your precious time on. Plus, I was very much in love with Jake. For a while, there was no room in my life for other things. My loyalty would not allow me to openly betray him by associating with his enemies. But I missed parties. I missed skinny dipping at night and barbecues on the beach. Happy weekends at sea. For frivolous, empty joys, Jake avoided the rich on principle. He despised their empty lives, as he said. I admired his core. But I missed parties. I wasn't a virgin when I came to Florida. I wasn't a slutty girl either, but I had a healthy interest in sex. I liked flirting. I liked the attention, and it turned me on. I slept with the Mendoza brothers my freshman year. Yes, at first I thought it was just Juan. I was amazed by his endurance and passion, until Sally told me the truth. I am still grateful to her for this. I was already starting to fall in love with the incredible sex, its intensity and amount of pleasure. But after I found out their secret, I stopped sleeping with them. The theft of a legal topic became a convenient excuse, and the incident with Jake is the final reason to no longer communicate with the brothers. But I still missed the parties. Jake doesn't know. During my senior year, I went to several beach parties, barbecues, and boat trips. Sally was there too, as were some of our rich classmates, and of course, the Mendoza brothers. None of these people endeared him to Jake. It's funny, but almost none of them aroused my sympathy either, except for Sally. I just needed to get out. I needed fresh air, empty-headed relaxation after hard work. It's funny, looking back, I realized that those same reasons motivated me to go to my high school reunion. But in terms of sexual relations, nothing happened at those stolen parties. I didn't sleep with anyone. There was flirting and some affection, lots of drunken kisses, but I never allowed anyone to have sex with me. I loved Jake. I think I still do. So we smoked, drank, and danced half naked on that boat. Then Juan cleverly took off my top just before we entered the marina. The sudden movement of the boat pressed my bare breasts against his chest. The blue top disappeared into the waves. In our foggy state, it all seemed like great fun. We got off the boat. My body was glowing with excitement and the sun. My consciousness, too. I completely forgot about my rings. I took them off so I wouldn't lose them while snorkeling. Psychologists could find other reasons. But the truth is that I didn't remember the rings until much later. I don't remember if I saw anyone on the pier. We laughed, discussing our entertainment. It wasn't until we got back to the resort that it dawned on me that I had lost my swimsuit top. I realized that this was the only spectacular swimsuit I took with me to the luau. Then I grabbed Juan's hand and told him that he should buy me a new one. He owed me. He grinned good-naturedly. Only if I can take it off later, he chuckled. In the boutique, he suggested that I choose an almost invisible model made of translucent ribbons. Although my excitement from our day's ride had not yet completely worn off, I gratefully declined. However, his choice definitely pushed the boundaries of my shyness. Never in my Boston life would I have taken the little yellow bikini I ended up choosing. I didn't have much time, so I didn't even try it on. I left Juan to pay for the purchase and hurried to my room. "Don't I at least deserve a kiss?" he shouted after me. I stuck my tongue out at him. The luau was held on the beach. I came there after a shower and put on a new bikini. I've never worn something so small and revealing before. This made me feel slightly excited and nervous. Luckily, I had a top and a pair to cover myself. I called my parents and little Jake. I asked about Jake SR. They said he called. He's still in Boston and won't be able to come. Perhaps even tomorrow. I was disappointed, but I wasn't surprised. I tried to call him on his mobile, but to no avail. It was almost dusk when Steve, Meredith, and Sally and I arrived at the luau. A small forest of torches created a living circle of light in a small grove of palm trees and bamboo thickets. It opened onto the beach and the calm, dark sea. The full moon was shining in the sky. There was food, fruit, and drinks. Most of my classmates were already there. The Mendoza brothers and their blonde doll arrived at the same time as us. Juan immediately demanded my attention. He couldn't wait to see the bikini he bought for me. I laughed it off. We laughed, and he led me to the table with food. And then I saw Jake. Of course, it couldn't be him. The trial was only supposed to end now. In addition, he told my parents that he was in Boston and could not come. And yet my heart jumped when I saw him at the edge of the torch-lit area. But when I took 2 steps towards him, he disappeared into the darkness. I pulled away from Juan's arms to go and check, but there was no one there. This confused me. I was sure I saw a man. I was sure it was Jake. But if this is so, then why didn't he come to me? Why did he hide? And why did he lie? I shook my head. Could this be an illusion? Maybe. Juan asked if everything was okay. I just looked at him and then shrugged and went back to the table with the food. After a few appetizers, we had a couple more cocktails. The salsa started playing and the atmosphere became lively. Several couples took to the makeshift dance floor. Everything was perfect. The black velvet sky was dotted with stars. The surf whispered quietly. The air was warm, the music sensual. People laughed. There was an atmosphere of memories and pleasant conversations over drinks. But I couldn't really get into it. My eyes constantly searched the dark corners around us. Twice I thought I saw someone's silhouette creeping around our party. I felt like someone was watching me from the dark foliage. A shiver ran down my spine. And then Juan pulled me onto the sandy dance floor. I love to dance. Boston and having a baby left me a little rusty in that regard, but the pulsating Latin rhythm and the enthusiasm of my classmates brought life back into me. Just like Juan. A surge of hot sensuality shook my body. This delighted me, and I began to follow his confident movements. Very close to us, Hector was dancing with Maria. She danced very well. Her hips seemed fluid. Her breasts were shaking to the beat of the music under her thin top. Then she suddenly tore off her top and threw it into the air. An explosion of wild applause and shouts echoed through the crowd. Everything that was happening seemed to shower me with refreshing rain. It was wonderful. Maria was wearing a tiny bikini made up almost entirely of thin strings. Her body glistened with sweat in the torchlight. Hector's hands slid over her body. Juan's hands, in my opinion. At first I tried to break free, but he only pulled me closer to him. To hell with it, I thought. Salsa is salsa, and this night is special. The beat, music, and screams flooded me. I danced with my eyes closed, immersed in a whirlwind of movements. My arousal grew with every wild turn of my body. The world around me was spinning like a whirlwind. Then my pero suddenly slipped from my hips and down my legs. I looked down and Juan was holding it in both hands, rocking it back and forth around my legs and hips, pulling me closer and then letting me go. It was great. I playfully pushed him away when he got too bold. We laughed. We flirted and challenged each other. Lord, have I ever been so young? And then I saw Jake again. This time I knew it was him. His face flashed in the light of the torches. It appeared and disappeared in the crowd. But now I was absolutely sure. My heart sank. I began to desperately try to escape from Juan's embrace. But his hands pulled me even closer. Jake, I whispered, but the sound of my voice was drowned out by the noise of the party. What was holding him back? Why didn't he move? Take me, I mentally screamed, begging him to come and take me. I belonged to him. But he just stood and watched, didn't move. How long has he been here? Why did he keep a low profile? Why did he lie when he said he wouldn't come? All my feelings were mixed up in my head. I was confused. My mind was spinning like a carousel. Suddenly, a strange thought appeared in my head. What is this, a game? So what's the matter? Does he want me to tease him, test him? This was so unlike Jake. Or did it still happen? Look at him. He just stands there and watches. Not a single emotion on his face. My confusion about his behavior grew into a new feeling. I was overcome with a hot, burning rage. With each sensual salsa movement, the rage rose higher and higher. My heart was pounding. Damn it, Jake. If this is what you want from me, here you go. These words screamed inside me, to the beat of the music. My arms wriggled along my body like snakes. Then they slowly rose up. My fingers grabbed the hem of my top, and I pulled it over my head in one smooth motion. The bright green top ended up under my feet, trampled in the sand. A cool breeze touched my bare skin. It was so sensual. I screamed in delight and made my chest bounce to the beat of the music. Loud applause rang out from all sides. But Jake disappeared again. But I knew that he was there, in the dark, looking at me. Jubilant, greedy, or was it just my sick husband watching me? This pervert, icy disappointment penetrated my body, drowning all my excitement. I continued to dance, my body writhing, now only wearing thin bikini strings. But my heart was cold. Now my every move was aimed at causing him pain. Oh, I'll make him regret this. I'll make you jealous. Let him drown in his jealousy. I danced wilder and closer. My stomach pressed tightly against Juan's thigh. I rested my head on his shoulder for a second. My hands slid over his wet skin. I touched the bulge in his shorts. My gaze shot arrows of fire into the darkness where I knew Jake stood. One arm wrapped around Juan, the other raised high above his head. I made a series of wild, bouncing movements that caused one breast to pop out of my swimsuit. Cool air embraced her. The crowd screamed with delight. With a piercing cry, I shook my bare breasts. I was in no hurry to put her back into her swimsuit. Then, when I did, I grabbed Juan's hand. I made a slight bow to my screaming fans and told him I was thirsty. The last time I looked into the darkness, I noticed Jake's mask among the bushes. It was a wooden face. I shrugged and picked up my top and pero. Then I hugged Juan and we went to get drinks. The cocktail cooled my rage, but the embers still remained. I walked away from Juan and the others to take another look at the dark bushes around us. What happened to him? I'm here. I am him. Can't he see how much I want him? What's holding him back? I knew that the light from the torches made me visible in the darkness. I begged Jake to come out to me, to join me, to finally take me into his arms. But no one came. The party was gradually coming to an end. Most of the guests began to return to the resort hotel. I noticed Hector and his half-naked wife heading towards the hot tub at the back of the grove. Sally also went there, leaning on the arm of an old classmate. I remembered him. He was a frequent guest at our old parties. "Let's go, Jill," Juan called me, pulling my hand. I hesitated. I looked around again. There was no one else in the darkness, and again a wave of anger washed over me. I let Juan pull me closer, and together we walked towards the jacuzzi. The water was excellent. Everyone stripped down to their swimsuits. Only our heads were visible from the water. The rest of our bodies were buried in hot bubbles. My mind began to relax. Alcohol, passionate dancing, hot water, anger at Jake, all this mixed into one whole. A heavy, hot veil covered me, calming the inner hurricane. When someone's smooth and strong hands began to massage my bare shoulders, they erased the remnants of confusion from me. Damn it. Why should I even care? Oh God. A sweet and relaxed silence surrounded us. All that could be heard was the gurgling of water and occasional moans. I sighed. Then she came out of the state of soaring blissful bliss. That was enough. Game over, Jake. Enough of this vile game. I rose from the water and announced that I was going to bed. Sally objected, but I grabbed my beach clothes and said goodnight to everyone. Enough, guys, enough. After a few steps, I felt Juan grab me around the waist. Enough is enough, I thought. I said, that's enough. No more flirting. Stop playing, Jill. Stop playing, Jake. Please take me. My God, I need you. Juan whispered something in my ear. I couldn't help but laugh. My 21 years have flattered me. That's enough. Can wait another minute, I thought. Let's give Jake what he paid for with his dirty coin. We walked along the path to my little house. I noticed a dark figure following us. She moved from tree to tree without getting closer. What are you waiting for, Jake? What else do you want me to do? Irritation filled me. How far is he going to push me? It was his strange behavior that made me challenge him. I teased him on the dance floor. I went even further into the jacuzzi. Isn't this enough? Don't make me do more, Jake. I'm too excited. We may both regret this later. Juan held me tighter. Our shadows merged into one as we walked. I turned my head to look into the bushes. Why did Jake let Juan get this far? Why did he continue to stand aside, watching from the darkness? This stopped being fun a long time ago. I stopped. A terrible thought pierced my mind. Is he? No, not Jake. Lord, no, my Jake would never want me. A cold shiver ran through me. Did I even know Jake after all these years? Did I really know him? I needed to know. I turned and hugged Juan. My head lay on his shoulder. His skin was warm to the touch and smelled of almond oil. You owe me, honey, he said. Do you remember? His hand slid the strap of my bikini off my shoulder. He kissed the bare skin. I looked back into the darkness again. I saw the stalker merge with the shadow. Vile, triumphant stalker. Was this my man? The father of my child? I was overcome with disgust. I took a deep breath. Then I smiled at my companion. Yes, Juan, I said. I owe you. Let's go. I opened the door to my room and let him inside. For the last time I glanced into the darkness. Then she closed the door. I looked at my trembling hands. Oh yes, I could feel dizzy and confused, but my body did not give in for a moment. It shuddered from the forbidden excitement of it all. But my Boston conscience has not yet given in to the hot and irresponsible tropics. However, once I was alone with Juan, I began to sober up a little. As soon as we entered the room, he grabbed me, but I gently pushed him away, smiling and telling him to take his time. I need to take a shower, honey, I said. I poured him a glass of wine and went to the bathroom. He didn't like it. But I needed to give Jake one last chance. I even thought I really believed it. I decided to hold out with this Cuban macho long enough for Jake to burst into the room and stop this ridiculous farce. I didn't lock the door. I undressed and threw my skimpy dress into the corner. I stretched my body, responded with pleasant pain. The shower was a blessing. I thought I could hear the water hissing on my overheated skin. Then the shower door opened. I turned around and whispered, Jake. But of course it was Juan. He was completely naked. Fuck, Jill, he moaned. Enough of this hellish game. He pushed me against the tiled wall and kissed me roughly on the lips. I screamed, no, and he immediately took advantage of the moment to penetrate my mouth with his tongue. His hands grabbed my breasts. He pressed me more and more. Hot water splashed on our heads. Then his mouth left my lips, moving down to my neck. My scream died down behind the sound of water. I tried to break free, but he had already pinned my hands to the tile. A wave of electrical excitement spread through my body. I felt weak in my legs. I whispered Jake's name. Jake never intervened. Once we were both satisfied, we moved to the bed. Juan recovered quickly, just as I remembered. Then we relaxed with a glass of wine. Juan said I was stupid to choose that wimp over him. I covered his mouth with my finger. One more word about Jake, Juan, I said, and you will leave. He grinned and buried his head between my breasts. I groaned. His mouth was all over my skin. It made me arch with desire. We made love again, and then I must have dozed off. A ray of sun touched my face through the gap in the shutters. He tickled my skin. I opened my eyes. Hector was not there. I was alone. I groaned and covered my face with my hands. Wine, of course. Repentance, just a hangover. I sat down and shook my head. My body ached like after a good workout. The shower washed away the traces of sex. Well, it was worth it. This thought made me wince. Was it worth it? Should I even think like that? And if so, for what exactly? I slid down the slippery tiles and just sat in the warm rain of the shower. Finally, thoughts of Jake came back to me. Everything that happened last night seemed like a dream. Was Jake really there? Did he really see all this? And just let it happen? If so, where is he now? Why didn't he intervene? I shook my head, not believing it. This simply couldn't happen. Jake would never allow that. I got up and dried myself. That's when I realized that I had lost my rings. I left them on the boat. Crap. I called Sally. After a long beep, her answering machine turned on. She must have still been sleeping. I didn't have Mendoza's numbers. I put on a swimsuit, blouse, and shorts. She went outside. The sun was already high. In the distance, people began to gather around the pool. Jake, of course, wasn't there. I hurried to the pier. Mendoza's boat left. One of the marina workers told me that they left very early. They didn't say whether they would return. Crap. I went upstairs to have breakfast. There were only a few people from our company at the table. I sat down with Steve and Meredith. They looked fresh as dew. I'm afraid I wasn't very talkative. This last day of the meeting was dedicated to rest. Some went shopping. I didn't want to. The day was to end with a farewell dinner. Most were planning to leave early in the morning to catch their planes. I felt alone. I missed Jake. We spent time by the pool. We swam a bit. Later, we sunbathed on the beach. There was talk of a Hawaiian luau party, and I received a few sheepish compliments on my interesting dance performance. I tried to laugh it off to hide my embarrassment. It appears the Mendozas are away on family business. Sally appeared on the beach around noon. She looked exhausted, but her smile remained the same. She nudged me with her shoulder and began hinting at the events of the previous night. I didn't tell her anything. Homecomings are meant to be about sharing old memories, not creating new adventures. I still told her about the lost rings. She had Juan's phone number, but he didn't answer. I begged her to find the rings as soon as possible and send them to Boston. Sally laughed. Such important rings, she chuckled. I gave her a very angry look. This only made her laugh even louder. After breakfast, I called Jake's home number. A huge sigh of relief escaped me when he answered. So he was in Boston. What was it in those cocktails yesterday that made me hallucinate? He said he couldn't come. He went to the airport, but felt unwell. He was still sick. He asked if the meeting was a success. I answered yes. I said that I miss him. He then asked if the meeting was romantic. Jake never uses those words. I tried to imagine what he meant. Then she said that everything was beautiful and wonderful, and that we need to come here together on vacation. I really meant it. He handed the phone to our son. As soon as I heard his voice, I almost burst into tears. Jake didn't go back to the phone. He just hung up. I looked at the endless ocean. My ears couldn't process Sally's chatter. I was shaking all over. From the moment of this telephone conversation, I was in some strange state between two contradictory feelings, and both of them were bad. Should I be relieved that Jake couldn't have been there last night? If he had, I would have ended up married to a pervert. But if Jake wasn't there, if he wasn't this silent observer driving me crazy, then I was in an even worse situation. I had no excuse for what I did to the Mendozas. A new thought struck me. Did I really imagine Jake's presence? Did I really create this cunning plan to ease my conscience? Just to convince yourself that everything was fine and give your body what it needed, so that this is not considered treason. Certainly, his espionage outraged me. I was put off by his dirty approval of what I was doing. But how could I even think that Jake was capable of such a thing? My Jake would burst in and surprise us all. He would have realized that it was all just flirting and playing as long as we were on the boat and on the dance floor. My Jake would know this. He would never just stand there, peering, drooling. Oh God. I stood up and apologized to Sally. I never made it to my room. I bought a huge bottle of mineral water to wash away the taste of vomit from my mouth. I needed alcohol. I returned home from Logan Airport on Sunday morning. I was glad for the cold and drizzly weather in Boston. The whole time on the way home, I was afraid to run into Jake. But the sunny, hot memories of Florida contrasted so much with this gray, ordinary city that the whole trip seemed like a dream to me, a distant mirage. It's almost as if Jill from Florida was a completely different person. The meeting at home was disappointing. Jake didn't even kiss me. He just left me standing in the hallway and ran to the toilet. I heard him throwing up. At least Jake Jr. was happy to see me. He talked endlessly about his days with my parents. I hugged and kissed him. For a minute, I felt that everything was fine. Looking back, I should have realized that Jake's illness was more of an excuse to avoid me. At that moment, I thought he was really sick. I felt sorry for him. He cleaned the house and ordered pizza, although he couldn't eat it himself. He didn't give me a chance to thank him. The next morning, when I woke up, Jake had already left for work. Strange, I thought. I expected him to take sick leave. I called his office. His voice was angry and rough. "What do you want?" he growled. I was confused. Then she said that we had not seen each other since Thursday. His answer was the strangest. "I'm surprised you even want to see me," he said. A heaviness formed inside me. I was outraged by his tone. I was really offended, but it got even worse. He almost spat into the phone. "Jill, I'm not ready to talk about your trip to Miami and who you saw and who saw you at the meeting." My heart sank. My voice became almost a whisper. "Jake, did someone call you from Miami?" He just hung up. I sat looking at the phone in my hands. A whirlwind of thoughts rushed through my head. Did Steve call him and tell him about the dancing, about how I was topless in the jacuzzi? Could this be the reason for his behavior, or did he learn something else? I called him again. He didn't answer. I started to worry. Jake returned late that evening, and he smelled of alcohol. This was all completely different from him. He never missed dinner with his son without calling. When I put the boy to bed, we talked. I wanted to understand why he was acting so badly. This offended him. "Where are your rings, Jill?" I expected this question, of course. I told him that I took them off for swimming and forgot. Sally will send them. I was amazed that he was not only upset, but tried so hard to hide it. Is it really all because of these damn rings? "I don't see any reason to be such an ass about this, Jake," I said calmly. Then I noticed that he wasn't wearing his wedding ring either. I pointed this out. He opened the collar of his shirt and showed a ring on a leather cord. "You know what, Jill?" he said. "When you put your rings back on your finger, I'll put mine on. Agreed?" The entire conversation left me confused. Yes, he was jealous. Maybe he was angry because I had a good time and he wasn't there. He then changed the subject to Sally, asking how she was doing. Then he asked if Sally had gotten me into some trouble in Miami. It's like I forgot that I'm married. It shocked me, and I think it was noticeable. He tried to smooth over what he had said, hinting that he probably meant the loss of the rings. He again started the joke that I, of course, would never hurt him. He made a taunt again, implying that I, of course, would never hurt him. I stood up on this. She said that this conversation was leading nowhere. I went to the bedroom. He did not follow me and stayed overnight in the guest room. It almost brought me to tears. I called Sally. I begged her to find my rings as soon as possible. She was just laughing and trying to figure out how that wonderful night went. I ignored her questions. I repeated only that she would find the damned rings and send them to me. The next morning, Jake was all smiles. But over breakfast, he started asking about the weekend again. His questions were deftly constructed, like those of a good lawyer, but I didn't give in. If he wasn't there, he couldn't know anything. And if there was, I don't care. The thought that Jake could be there, spying on me and not interfering, tormented me sickeningly, and the thought that he could push me to continue made me sick. "I will still find out the truth, sooner or later," he said before leaving. He didn't kiss me goodbye. This bothered me for the rest of the day, not out of guilt, but out of anticipation of something worse. That evening, he returned to questioning again. He even used words like confession. I could have screamed at his nagging. Why this torment if he wasn't there? After all, if he wasn't there, it's just petty jealousy. If he hasn't seen it himself, he has no reason not to trust me. Unless Juan? No. The rage grew inside me. I could barely contain it. Then he calmly threw a small bomb. He said he needed to leave for a few days. I asked why. He just looked at me sadly. He packed his bag and left. As he left, he reminded me to tell him when I found the rings. I just sat there, watching him close the door. That same evening, I found the rings. It's funny that I didn't immediately open the albums with photos of our wedding. I first pulled out an album with my pictures from law school. Jake's cold shoulder made me want to go back to the 21-year-old girl I felt like again over the weekend. I spent a long time looking at photographs of Jake and me, studying our faces, trying to understand what we had lost since then. I saw that we laughed a lot. But of course, they were photographs. Don't we always smile in photos? When I was about to put the album back, something fell out of it. These were my two rings taped together. I sat down. I was in shock. Here it is the proof. I actually saw Jake in Florida because he was there. Everything was true. He spied on me. He didn't show up to see me flirting, dancing, kissing. He pushed me step by step. He never interfered. My Jake was a voyeur, a stalker. He forced me to continue, step by step. First he proposed a game, and then he turned it into dirty, spite-filled revenge. He let me cross the line. I cried all night, not out of guilt or regret. I cried because I lost my love. The next morning I woke up and started thinking about Jake. I felt much better. Tears washed away the bitterness. I felt lighter and very calm. Now I understand Jake's position. He turned his burning feelings of jealousy into a self-fulfilling prophecy. His long-term hatred of people like the Mendozas blinded him, and he did not notice that my innocent flirtations were not a threat. From the very beginning, he was sure that I would betray him, and then he began to do everything to make it become a reality. He never gave me a chance. Well, I won't give him a chance. The game he's been playing these last few days is a game I could play just as well, perhaps even better. Did he want me to confess? For me to fall to my knees and express regret for my betrayal? I'm afraid he will have to wait a very long time. If anyone should ask for forgiveness, it should be him. For espionage. For pushing me. For lack of trust and loyalty. I don't think he knew that I saw him there at the party. Funny how he tried to hide the source of his information. I think he was ashamed, too. As I knew Jake, there must be at least a grain of doubt in him about the correctness of his actions. Well, I wasn't going to free him from this. I used the next few days to get some things done. I also spent time reconnecting with Jake Jr. after my long weekend away. And most of all, I used these days to let Jake know that I never found the ring. Then I called his office. The line was busy, so I left a message. Jake, I'm worried. Are you even coming home? What's going on? Please tell me what to do. We need to talk and figure this out. Little Jake asks where you are. Call me. He only called back the next day. I knew why he felt it necessary to wait. This only strengthened my resolve. When he called, I was full of gratitude. It didn't change his arrogant tone. He started talking about rings again. I almost cried at how petty and pathetic it was. Why are you so concerned about my rings? I asked. I told you I asked Sally to find them. I think they might have been stolen from the hotel. If Sally doesn't find them, I'll have to file a claim with the insurance company. He was silent. Then I explained to him again why I took off the rings. Like, this happens. I was upset about their loss, too. But why make such a fuss? Like I took them off to feel unmarried, to be free for other men? Is this what you're leading to? He asked if I actually did it. When I found out that he was following me, I almost exploded with rage. But I looked offended and outraged. It was good. That's exactly how I felt. I don't think it was what he expected. He began to list his hints and accusations again. He asked me to remember our wonderful memories, happy times, unforgettable moments. I couldn't help but smile sadly. He was trying to subtly hint at the album and the rings hidden there. His voice sounded like that of a lost child. He desperately wanted to return everything back, to find a way out without losing face. For a few seconds, my heart softened. I told him that I love him, and it's true, I love him. But then my thoughts returned to what happened in Florida, and all the warmth went away. Late on Sunday, I called his office again. His hello sounded calm. Some of the anger has passed. Fine. Are you there? I asked. Yes, I'm here, he sighed. Yeah, Jake, I'll meet you in the lobby of your office in 10 minutes, okay? For what? Please, just be there. Fine. I met him in the lobby. He looked unwell. However, he looked unwell all winter. I tried to look my best. The tan residue was still visible. I put on tight jeans and a nice white blouse. I also wore makeup. I wanted all the benefits I could get. When we entered his small office, I took off my heavy winter coat. I know he didn't care how cheap his workplace looked. I think he even considered it a sign of his modesty. I hated this place. I always thought that this wretchedness was a kind of hidden form of vanity. He sat in silence, his eyes glued to me. I have a problem, Jake, I said. I know, he replied. Me too. I sat up straight. Last week, I spent $7,000 on our credit cards. He frowned, not understanding. Yes, Jake. You were so obsessed with me not wearing rings. I ordered duplicates from a jeweler, exact copies that I could use to trick you. You mean to lie to me, don't you, Jill? I don't know, Jake. Would you call it that? I was just trying to save our marriage. I thought losing 2 rings wasn't worth destroying our family. I raised my left hand. Both rings sparkled on my finger. He turned away and began to look out the window where the twilight of Boston was gathering. Then I found the originals, Jake. The silence stretched. You knew all along, didn't you, Jake? How did my rings end up here? He looked up, and then he made the very mistake that destroyed all hopes. His voice became cold. The arrogance with which he spoke almost erased his face. The victim here is me, Jill, he said. I will ask questions. You can ask me yours only during cross-examination. I should have left at that moment, but there were still things he needed to know. I objected that this was not a trial. He said it should be a trial, that if he cannot be a lawyer, he can be a husband and father, and that little Jake might end up losing one of his parents. He even hinted that the boy might not be his son. I watched him dig his own grave with his arrogant arrogance. It hurt me to see this. How could things go so bad? Keep going, Jill, he said. Give your testimony. But remember, you are under the oath of marriage. You are obliged to tell the truth. Tell me everything without hiding anything. If you lie, it will be death. The death of relationships, husband and wife, father and son, lovers and friends, perhaps even mother and son. Winter twilight enveloped the office. My voice became a whisper. I hated the trembling that was reflected in him. Jake, I said, I came here to understand who you really are. His eyebrows rose in the silence I allowed to stretch. I came to find out if it's worth making an effort to repair our marriage, Jake. And you know, honey, you just ruined the chance. Anger flashed in his eyes. The face turned red, and the fists clenched so that the knuckles turned white. For the first time in my life, I was afraid that he would hit me. But I had to continue. You wanted the truth, I said. Honesty, remember? My voice was quiet but confident. He rose from the table. Really, woman? He hissed through clenched teeth. The truth is that you slept with 2 men, knowing that I was not there. The truth is that you betrayed our marriage and my love in front of our friends. The truth is that you are a cheater and a corrupt bitch. I let that terrible word echo through the room. I slowly turned the rings on my finger. Then she looked into his eyes. They were filled with anger and turned red. No, Jake, I said. The truth is that you were there. And not only I know this, I saw you. You were there all evening. He sank back into his chair. I lowered my voice even more. You were there and you didn't do anything. You hid like a cheap voyeur. You wandered around the luau like a vulture, Jake. Oh yeah, it was crazy on the dance floor. I haven't danced like that in years. I felt free and young again, but everything was innocent, Jake. Everything was innocent until you clouded it with your dirty looks and intentions. The first time I saw you, I even followed you. But you disappeared into the shadows, Jake. I was surprised by his silence. I expected him to interrupt me, yell at me, screaming that he had every right to observe whether his wife would be faithful in his absence. But he didn't scream. He was simply silent, his eyes wide open. This was news to him. He didn't even know I saw him. Now he mentally returned to what had happened and re-examined everything that happened from a new angle. Everything I told him made him realize that his presence back then was not as invisible as he thought. Jake has always been a straightforward person, but not without feelings, and I saw that now he realized that everything had changed. The question was, could he overcome his pride? Jake, I continued, you confused me to the limit, dear. At first I thought that you were starting some kind of game, that you challenged me to this flirtation, daring me to tease you. It was so unlike you, but I was excited from dancing, from drinking, from all this. I decided, to hell with him, and I started dancing really dirty. I started taking off my clothes like Hector's wife. His hand covered his eyes. I walked up to the table to touch him, but he pulled away. He looked me straight in the eyes. Honey, I continued, you never came for me. You just kept pushing me further and further, getting me going and not stopping myself. You made me feel so dirty, Jake. He stood up, turned away, and went to the window. I saw his reflection in the dark glass. He was very pale. It doesn't matter, he finally said. You betrayed me. In the silence that followed, I could hear the old batteries creaking. I folded my hands, hiding the rings. I could almost taste the disappointment. It was so tangible. I stood up and took my coat. Jake, I said, those $7,000 were not for new rings. I found the original rings a week ago. I took the money to leave you for Florida. Together with my savings, this should be enough for little Jake and I to live quite comfortably until I find a job. He turned to me as if he had been bitten by a snake. You won't take Jake away, he shouted. I looked at him calmly. No, I said, I won't take him. He's already there. He stayed with Sally until I came for him. Jake rushed forward. His hands resembled claws. I ran out into the corridor and rushed down the stairs. I heard him rushing after me, but I managed to reach the lobby where the guard was sitting. Jake stopped, out of breath. He really should have exercised more. I went outside. My car was parked right at the entrance. Jill, was the last cry I heard. Please don't go, Jill. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.